MK.0608, Taffy Puller. That is my actual name. My name is Taffy Puller, for that is what I do and that is what I love to do. My brothers and I were built for war. We were soldiers with flesh made from steel and wood. The only difference between us was the small sigil placed upon our foreheads. We were perfect in our way. We were built for perfection. We were built for war. Learning military techniques was easy enough. Holding blades and learning the strengths and weaknesses of defensive fortifications was simple to our calculating minds. We had no fear of death or pain, because we could neither die nor be made to hurt. That was when our human commanders realized a fatal flaw in us. We could not fear and we could not want. We didn't know how and we didn't know why. We had seen brothers die on the battlefield and thought nothing of it. They simply ceased to function in the midst of combat. After a few victories and the lose of several of my kind, our human captain, George Calhoun, brought us all together and told us what happens when one of us dies. Nothing. There is nothing there. There is nothing for soldiers with steel flesh and wooden sinew. All that would await us was a dark inky blackness that consumes all that would be seen. There was no wood. There was no steel. There was nothing to see or hear. We would never see our brothers again. We knew nothing of fear before that moment because there was nothing for us to be afraid of. George planted the seed of fear within us. From that point on, we were more careful. We were cautious. We didn't want to die. We didn't want to lose brothers. We didn't want there to be nothing. Through fear, we lived. Fear kept us alive. For the gift of fear, I thank George deeply. For without fear, I would likely not be alive today nor many of my brothers. That wasn't the only gift George gave us, though. He was our captain and a brilliant tactician with an inquisitive mind. He wasn't like the magic users, but that didn't make him unintelligent. He wanted to know what were we. Clearly, we were metal brought to life with magic. No. He wanted to know what was inside of us. We couldn't eat, but did we want to? We didn't need sleep, but was it something we would like to try? These were curious questions. I never asked myself these things before. It was like I didn't have the words to even know, then he just gave them to me. In asking us about what we wanted out of life and what we might do after the war, he told us about his own plans. He was going to open a candy shop. Calhoun's Confectionaries, he called it. He told us of a building that he was going to buy back in his hometown. He was going to fill it with lights and machines and candy. We didn't know what candy was. Was it like knives or oil? Did you use it to burn enemies or bring light to the darkness? No. He told us, humans use it for repairs, not physical ones, but the damage one takes to the soul. That was a newer concept still. Soul. What was that? Is candy really so attached to the human soul? He told us about it time and again. He was going to be a businessman, and he was going to sell his candies to all the small humans and all the big humans. It brought a smile to his face. Happiness. I never smiled before. I didn't know what it meant to be happy. I told him what I wanted to do after our long campaign. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to make candy. When the war was over, when the battles had been won and we no longer had to pick up the blade, 3 of us went to work for George Calhoun. He told us that if we were going to work for him, then we were going to need names. Names. We never had names before. We looked at the jobs we would be doing. We looked at what was expected of us. Then, we came to him the next day with names. My brothers chose the names Candy Spinner for the making of cotton candy and Pastry Baker for the making of cookies and cakes and things. When my turn came around, I told him my names was Taffy Puller. I would be pulling the taffy. The shop wasn't small, but it wasn't large either. In the window, I would perform my duties. The hands that once had killed were given new purpose, and people came up to the glass to see me pull my taffy. They were transfixed by the metal man making their sweets for them. Many came in to see the metal man of Calhoun's Confectionaries, and they smiled. The little humans smiled. The big humans smiled. They bought candy, our candy. I couldn't smile, but I could make them smile. So many of them came to see us. So many of them ate our sweets. They were happy. I was happy, but those days of happiness couldn't last forever. Late one night at closing time, I found George in his office, clutching his head. His normally well-greased hair was frayed and disheveled as he hunched over papers on his desk. "George," I said, putting my hand on his shoulder, "it's time to go home." He looked up with pain in his eyes. He said, "Taffy, what am I going to do about these bills? Between this and those men that keep harassing us for money." He was shaking. It wasn't fear. It was anger. I knew, because I felt it, too. I just wanted them to leave us alone. We all just wanted to make candy. We just wanted to make our money-making people smile in peace. What was so wrong with that? These things will still be here tomorrow, as will I. We can deal with it then, after you've gotten some sleep. I said to my old friend with all the earnestly I could muster. His health wasn't doing well. The stress was getting to him. We will tackle this together, the same as we always have. Now, go home and go to bed. It was like that for a few months. There were days when we would make the people smile, and George would put on a show to keep our customers happy. There were nights where I would find him asleep at his desk with an empty bottle next to him or a glass with half-melted ice. I hated seeing him like that. Then, one day, it was done. He came in one morning, chipper than ever. He had a spring in his step and more energy than I had seen him have in over a year. We asked him what was going on, and he responded, "Don't worry, lads. All our money problems are over." It was good news to hear. We weren't sure what was going on, but if the boss said that everything was better, then things must have been better. He put down the bottle. There was no more drinking from him. Then, we found out what happened. He took up a partner. She was an old woman who loved baking and owned a few stores of her own. She came in one day with a cart of supplies that she was going to bring into the store. It was an expansion, she called it. There were baking trays that floated through the air and took care of the baking. There were sticks that spun themselves up in cotton candy. So we didn't have to worry about that. Then, she brought in dolls that she put in the window to pull taffy. In the end, there was so little for us to worry about. There was so little for us to do. It was nice, though, to see George back to his old self. At least, when we saw him. With so little to do and so little to worry about, we left much of the work to the old woman's things and put ourselves in storage, waiting for when George might call on us again. It was dark, but it didn't bother us so much. We were used to staying up throughout the entire night with little to do from our time in the military, keeping watch. One night, though, the door was left cracked. There was arguing. It wasn't a simple disagreement. There was the sound of a scuffle, chairs got knocked over. There was a crash. I rushed outside to see what was going on. Before I ever opened the door all the way, I could hear laughter. I could see fire and smoke. I burst through the door. George was there, bleeding on the ground with a shelf dropped on him. I could see the tail of that old woman's dress scurrying out the door. The fires from our ovens were burning in an impossible, unstoppable kind of way. I tried to help him up, but he screamed, "No. Stop her. She has the children. Save the children." I looked to the fire. I looked to my collapsed friend. Then, I nodded and ran after her. I ran through the back kitchen. There were pots. There were pots of meat. We didn't cook meat. There were cookies on a tray. Some of them had teeth baked into them. I ran, fearing the worst. What had she been doing in our store? My legs carried me to where we stored the flour and sugar. She wasn't there. In her place was a small human. Her mouth was gagged. Her hands were tied. I picked her up. I looked back, but smoke and light were filling the room. I carried her past shelves full of things for candies and confectionaries until we got to the same door that old woman must have escaped through. It led to a back alley. I bashed at the door with my shoulder. I threw my own, heavy, metal body at it until it splintered and broke under me. Rain. There was water in the streets. I couldn't see that woman. I just saw dark clouds and the light of a flame climbing higher and higher. I undid the girl's bindings and brought her to the main street, where people were standing in front of our burning store. My brothers were there, their wooden part singed and cracked. In front of them lay a body. It was charred and warped. It was breathing in an agonizing way. It looked at me with one red eye. I leaned down to hear what it was saying to me. "The girl?" he asked. "She's alive," I told my friend. "Good," he said. "I'm so happy." That was the last time I heard the voice of the great George Calhoun, a man that didn't deserve to die. He taught me to fear. He taught me happiness. He taught me what it meant to be human. What it meant to have a soul. I do have a soul. I have a burning human-shaped soul. It hungers. It wants to live. It wants to make people happy. It wants to kill witches. Author's name and the link to original text in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. And please join our channel.